Hey there, everyone. It's 8:25 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, May 3rd, and who knows? The year 2023. Anybody's guess. I know I'm following right up on the heels of my most recent publication of the Obery Hours episode number 14. For those who have already watched it, thank you for being supportive of those what have become a very deep dive word study event, which I enjoy immensely, though they are really time consuming to put together and get to you folks. That's one of the biggest drawbacks, not a drawback that I would complain about at all. I enjoy them very much because of what they reveal to me and everyone else. So thank you very much for watching and commenting and liking. There's at least one more episode, maybe a couple, in that series entitled The Vertical Flip. One thing about that, by the way, I already had a comment regarding the music that I'm using at the front and the back. I changed the music. The music was from one of my favorite bands from like the CBGB time, 70s, 80s, Television. The music I was using at the front was, well, actually the front and the back, was Venus by Television, which I just loved that song. But, of course, I was losing my monetization. It's like entirely. It wasn't even Split, and Split I know about because of the one I just uploaded. The one I just uploaded, I went through, I pay for the premium version of Screencast-O-Matic. That's what I do most of these videos through, is the premium version that I pay for, and it's not cheap, of Screencast-O-Matic. And the reason, of course, that you would pay for a premium in a video editing software is not only because, you want full access to everything that the video editing software can offer, but as far as editing, but you also, I want full access to all of the licensed material they have in there as far as sound effects, music, images, videos. These are supposed to be the perks to a video editing software, thus why I would want to pay a premium for it. However, after all that I went through to put together that Obery Hours and checked out a lot of the music, and they don't have a huge music library, not like Cyberlink Power Director, but the thing is, Cyberlink Power Director, I still haven't figured out how to get those files small enough without using another outside software, and that's just a pain in the neck, so they need to sort that out. Screencast-O-Matic does. They can just put the files 3 hours long with things added, text and things like that. They can still get them into this pretty, really small container. And I appreciate that. And they do it pretty quickly. So I found out after all of that and editing and finding just the right music and everything for at least the Obery Hours, that music that I used on this last one, I get a message at the end, right when I'm getting ready to publish, that there's this licensed material on it, and they didn't even catch at the front. They only caught it at the back. That I would have to share the microshekels that I make from 300 to 500 views on my main YouTube channel on an average. Over time, by the way, not like in the first week, that I would have to split that, and they didn't give me the full breakdown of how I'd have to split that. So I got to split my microshekels now over something that's supposed to be as a holder of Screencast-O-Matic. And so I don't know where to get the licensing agreement for that. And I need a certificate from Screencast-O-Matic, and I'm thinking, am I going to have to do this now every single time with YouTube, and how much is that going to hold me up? I get the fact of withholding based on licenses and copyrighted materials. I absolutely get that. Someone's intellectual materials should be someone's intellectual material. As far as they should be able to say, I don't want you to use my intellectual material, or I don't want you to use my intellectual material for free. 100%. The messed up thing is, the track that they said in question on there, it wasn't even under the same name as what I got it. It was under a different name in Screencast-O-Matic, so I got to go through all that. And hopefully I will get somehow compensated, refunded my microshekels from the time I had to wait to get this all sorted out. Somebody needs to do that. Somebody needs to, get this sorted. And it makes me wonder if I'm going to have to, every time I use something by them, am I going to have to submit something to YouTube, which is going to hang me up, every time? That's a real headache. When you think about it, it's a real headache. And actually, here's the thing. When I went to Screencast-O-Matic's site to try to sort this out, I found out that they have been bought out, changed their name to ScreenPal. And if they've been bought out, I don't know this for sure, but it's my assumption that they are some guys, just some guys, who developed a really great software. Screencast-O-Matic is an awesome software for people who want to create videos, specifically like mine, not ones that are obsessively put together, edited, and sharp and cleaned up and, all that. But this sort of environment, it's great for that. And I don't have proof of this, but I suspect, because this happens so often, these were some guys that developed this. Guys and gals, maybe. All with, and this is the whole mindset of people developing software and hardware, and mostly software these days, and apps. Let's develop one that's really popular, and then some big company will give us a bunch of money for it. That mindset, I'm going to get really mad and I'm going to start cussing because of how fucking low life, not thinking about the people around you, not thinking about the future. If you planned on having children, the sort of future that's going to create for them, it's a future of nothing but Amazon. I was going to say Amazon and Walmart, but fuck it. There won't even be a Walmart. It'll just be all Amazon. It'll all be just all Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and a couple of other things. That's the future that people like you who are creating these things, making something good, all in the prospects of selling it off to some major corporation, or even if you say, well, it wasn't a major corporation who bought it, they were like mid-level. Okay. Have you checked in to see who really owns them? The mid-level. Have you taken a look at that? Because the closer you look at these like mid-level corporations, the more you find that they're owned by the big ones. Everything anymore is owned by a very small group of people. When I say very small, yeah, I mean thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe. But you look at that in the scheme of like 7-8 billion people, that's a fraction that own everything. So I find that whole mindset is a degenerate mindset. It is an entirely existential here and now. Give me my gimmies, give me my pleasure right here, right now. And I'm not saying it's entirely the fault of the people that are doing that. They've been programmed with this mentality. You need to develop. What you need to do is develop a software that the big guys want to buy so they can fuck it all up. Except they don't include the end there. But look, anybody who develops a software, if they got half a brain in their head, they know that if they sell it to these bigger guys, that they're gonna fuck it all up. They know that. They should know that. Let's not be children. You people who are developing these softwares and you want to sell it up, you know damn well any corporation that wants to buy something that you've created and made into something good. They're not buying it so that they can make it better. Not better for the end user. Not better for the people who have already entered into a contract with you. And by the way, they oftentimes, and I'm not saying this is Screencast-O-Matic hell, it could still be owned by the same people and they just changed the name. For what reason, I have no idea. But I'm saying in general, a lot of these, right in the middle of your contract, sold to somebody else who is going to implement different policies. Fucking the end user. That's what's going on. That's why I consider people who develop these things, these good things, all with the intent to sell it up like that. You have no soul. You have no soul. Well, I've got to make money. Wait, everybody's got to make money. Everybody's got to make money. But the thing is this, if everybody to make money decides that they need to develop something good so that they can sell it off to these monsters who are going to shit on it and the end user, you're part of the problem. I'm sorry that you and a large number of others like you all have to take the same position and do the same right thing. That sucks. It is unfair to the small amount of people who want to do something true, good, genuine, quality. It is unfair to them that everybody else out there is willing to take that shit road. It is. It's entirely unfair. It's one of the reasons why so often I very sharply, very crudely pass out judgment in a very broad, general way. Because, come on, we know the old expression, and people would say, that old expression. It's an old expression because it's true. No one is an island. No one is an island. This is the logic that the state can use to force people by law or simply force people by social shaming to conform to mask mandates. No one is an island, because they'll use a sort of shaming. What, don't you care? Don't you care about the health, the well-being of others? Don't you care? No one is an island. Don't you care? And the thing is, what they're using when they do that, the psychology is correct. That is a correct way to look at it. Like, no, you can't just do whatever you want. No. Because you interact all of your actions, because you're not an island. All of your actions are indirect interactions with others. So no, you don't get to do whatever the hell you want to do. Guilt-free. You don't get to do whatever you want to do guilt-free. You bear responsibility. If you help through your inaction, when people say, well, I didn't do nothing. Right. You didn't do nothing. So if you, through your inaction, fuck up the future for my children, I might have a serious issue with you and either your negative actions or inactions. No one is an island. So that should segue us right into what I wanted to talk about today. It's not, I don't think, when I took a look at this a little bit, I don't think I'm going to be making any points that are like, there it is, right there. You see that hard-hitting point. but I do want to kind of mull over a few things that I think are important. They're weird things, they're just a few oddities. And they have to do with places, a place and places, and things that I find to be some of the most interesting things and places and topics that are almost never discussed. And if you want to find any deep and detailed discussions on this whole subculture and subset of very, not just interesting things, but amazingly important things for instance, economy and the control of people. You typically have to find them through like local, really small, by the way, because I've visited these places, like local, really small libraries and historical societies. And historical societies are a very interesting topic in and of themselves, because they actually represent the sort of private ownership of a great deal of material on the history of local things and events. It's really interesting the way that information gets controlled, and information about these topics. And these topics essentially are the Great Lakes region, their immense richness, even among, or in context with the immense richness of the land of North America east of the Mississippi. I can't tell you just how rich in every way, shape, and form all of the land east of the Mississippi in North America is. Now, if you live west of the Mississippi, I'm not dissing you, because there's some good land west of the Mississippi, but most of it is near the coast, north and near the coast, starting in Northern California, up through Oregon, Washington, into British Columbia, Canada. That's good land. And I'm not forgetting Idaho. So don't give me any shit. I know Idaho's good too. It's snuggled up right next to Washington. Yeah. Totally decent land. The people who live there love it. They think it's absolutely beautiful. I'm not arguing, okay? I'm not arguing. But in part, I'm talking about sustaining life and richness of resources, okay? If you look at a map of North America, and I still have my, I'm gonna have to go away from the object I was going to focus in on. But you know, the nice thing about Google Maps is they let you refocus on something that you want to look at. Google Earth, that is. Google Fake Earth. So essentially west of the Rockies and to the north. I'm not really counting Nevada and Utah because, listen, no offense to people from Nevada and Utah, but it's, you know, it's nothing like the green, lush richness of the northern rainforests, which is Northern California, Oregon, Washington. A little bit in Idaho, you can see that here, Idaho and western Montana, you know, like Glacier National Park and all that stuff, and then up here into British Columbia, Canada, right? Beautiful land, but here, look. Let's look at the proportions, right? So you got the Mississippi running here, of course, creating the western border of Wisconsin, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi. And so everything west of there is just amazing. I tell my son all the time, I tell him, you live in like the best place on earth, period. Now, is this my pride talking? No, it's not my pride talking. Look, I come from Indiana, and the parts of Indiana I come from, I mean, they're not the greatest places on earth, but I love it still. I live now in west central-ish Michigan, in the Mitten, and it's beautiful, but there's no, like, sense of pride. Just because you got born in a certain place or raised in a certain place, it gives you no... It gives you no justification for having some kind of pride like you helped to make it that way. In fact, most of the people that live in the greatest place on earth, and I'm not, not including Canada. These parts of Canada are just fantastic, you know, from Quebec down here, Toronto area and such. Even up Winnipeg. But no, in fact, you know, a lot of the people I think actually make the whole place worse due to their inaction or their actions if they suck that bad, which a lot of them do. So if you look west of the Mississippi, all the land, all the sheer amount of land, I mean, you know, we're talking about this is easily 3 times the size here, okay? But do you realize, as far as population goes, the United States alone, 80% of the population lives east of the Mississippi. 20% west of the Mississippi. Yeah, buddy. Why? Not as resource rich in every way, shape, and form. In part. You know, resource rich, you need good water that's full of good minerals to drink. You need water for travel, or you need trains, and they just can't lay down trains to go just everywhere in the West. Like in the East, the train map, if you look at a train map of east of the Mississippi and west of the Mississippi, you almost can't see land east of the Mississippi because the train tracks are so dense. There's just so much ground to cover here, and you just don't have as much. Some of these states out there barely have a couple of fucking trees to rub together between them. Just not as resource rich. And I'm saying it like that because I know there's going to be people west of the Mississippi that are going to be like, the hell are you talking about? Come on, man. Let's just be real here. It's not. It's nowhere near. Now, yeah, I mean, in the plain of the Mississippi, like near the Mississippi and throughout, you know, Missouri and all that, there's still, you know, real good land. And that's actually here along the Mississippi, on the west side of the Mississippi, and then you go all the way out here to the coast, and then you've got your more dense populations, you know, there. And then all you've got is some dotted dot, here, there. Okay? So I'm not saying these places are good for nothing. Not even close. They're not as resource dense as east of the Mississippi. Not only do we have plenty of farmland, and you'd be surprised, it doesn't take, and here's one of the reasons why I'm not saying, you know, not at all. Because, for instance, in Minnesota, most of the iron of the world still comes from an area of Minnesota that you could technically consider east of the Mississippi, though it's probably like more north of the Mississippi, because where the Mississippi sort of rises from. And areas where grain is grown is still, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of grain east in Iowa and Minnesota. That's very true. Don't forget the shit tons of grain that's grown in Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, to name but a few. And that's not counting all of the grain in all of these other states, because even though they are less even and flat as these states, they still grow a lot of grain. There's just no contest, resource-wise, okay? Around the Mississippi, and especially around the Great Lakes, resource-wise, there's no contest. Now, some people might say, well, that's not true when I name some of the resources. It's not true, but it is. And I believe the reason that we just simply don't see the proliferation of resource harvesting and use, especially around the Great Lakes and other areas, is because there has been a deliberate program of keeping the people of all of these areas as poor as possible. One way to do that is by stopping the production or harvesting of a number of the resources found in all of these areas and moving them to other places. One of the big operations, as far as that goes, is the whole Great Lakes, Superior and Upper Huron, even Lake Michigan, the mitten of Michigan or the Lower Peninsula. New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Vermont, New Hampshire, and of course, all of these areas of Canada that are skirting the lakes to the east, they are so damned loaded with lumber, softwoods, and hardwoods. We could have an unending lumber, and still do, by the way. There still is lumber industry all over here. But the scale of it, you could stop all the lumber industry over here on the West Coast and pick it up all in the Great Lakes region, and you wouldn't miss a beat, and we wouldn't be, turning the place into deserts. It's that thick with lumber still, soft and hardwood lumber, still. So when you start thinking, if I talk about any resources, east of the Mississippi, Great Lakes region, and of course the eastern, all of these states, they're so full of so many resources, it boggles the mind. If I name a resource and someone should think, well, nothing even comes from there anymore. There's a reason nothing comes from there anymore. It's not because you can prove that those things have been exhausted, like with the example of lumber. Hasn't come close to being exhausted. You would not believe the forests of softwoods and hardwoods around the Great Lakes. You wouldn't believe them. Not a chance. There's not a chance they've come even close to being exhausted. The richness of resources in this area is mind-boggling. So mind-boggling that I propose they purposely destroyed most of the industries, resource-rich industries, between mostly World War I and World War II. And what they do is they funnel off a certain amount of all of these resources, keeping most of the people, except the ones running the place, the insiders running the places, keeping most of the people very poor, while they funnel off enough to keep themselves very wealthy, and more importantly, they're already very wealthy generationally. To keep them, this is the important part, to keep them in control. That's the point of ruining all of those resource-rich, not even close to being exhausted industries, keeping them closed down, keeping them only trickling out production. It's a war. It's an economic war. And it's specifically an economic war that's being waged primarily on North America, east of the Mississippi. You name me a place that's even close to as resource-rich and abundantly wealthy in everything. Everything. Not something like, well, there's a huge iron mine in Australia. Okay, there's a huge iron mine in Australia. And Australia basically is comprised, such a big continent, is comprised of mostly a few coastal cities, and that makes up the bulk of Australia's population because it's not resource rich. It's got some things in some places that are very good, which I'm sure was the whole reason that the powers that be started colonies and cities where they did, in certain ports and so on and so forth. That makes sense. But nearly as resource rich, not a chance. So maybe you can name a few things at a few places that are more abundant than what is currently being produced in North America east of the Mississippi. Not what actually exists there, but what's being produced. And then you'd have to prove to me that it literally is because there's just not as much in North America, specifically east of the Mississippi, and so on and so forth. It is an economic war that's going on. It's total economic war. And the people who choose to not do nothing and live my life, I want to live my life. Why can't I live my life? I just want to live my life and I want to just do my work and then my 9 to 5 and eat my good stuff and go on some vacations, and I'm going to wait with my fingers crossed that when I'm dead, which hopefully is when I'm 263 years old, that Jesus takes me to glory. That's not a mindset I find to be even close to bordering on okaysville. It's not okay. It's fucked up and it's completely selfish. And you are like one of those people in the Matrix. That's what you are. If that's the way you think or live, that's what you are. You're like one of those people in the Matrix where, Morpheus is telling Neo that any single person in the Matrix can be an agent at any given time. That's why. That's exactly why. I mean, besides the fact that most people who think like that and live like that would call the coppers on their neighbor over some bullshit rule in a heartbeat. So, hey, let's bring it in. I'd like to talk a little bit about an aspect of the biggest secret I know of. Open secret. And that secret is the Great Lakes being the jewel of resources east of the Mississippi. And that's saying a lot because let me tell you something. Holy moly, the states east of the Mississippi are so full of resources. Even Indiana, we have far more. We are far more resource rich in far more things than just hillbillies. Okay. First off, we don't have many hills. Secondly, Indiana actually has a great number of defunct coal mines. They say defunct. And again, that's another thing that I'm not 100% convinced of that doesn't exist there. Illinois, did you know Illinois, our neighbor, and by the way, Indiana, Illinois, and at least a large portion of Wisconsin were all part of the Indiana Territory, according to their story, not all that long ago. Illinois ranks 10th in states for resources. You could have an enormously powerful, thriving iron industry, mostly on just resources you could pull from Illinois and Indiana and Wisconsin. Hey, maybe that's the reason for this huge industrial area that we know of as Chicago and Northwest Indiana. Northwest Indiana, if you look at this, by the way, if you just look at the map and you don't have a state's boundary imposed upon you on the map right there, you would think that this whole area was a city that absolutely dwarfs what we think of as just the city of Chicago. And of course, it's been, broken up, balkanized so much in our minds that we don't realize what a total MFN powerhouse this place is and how many steel mills still exist, the steel mills, and there are steel mills that we have ghosts of that once existed here. We have a mill in the south part of Chicago here that isn't even there anymore, that rumor has it had 11 to 12 blast furnaces alone. It was an enormous place, and that's on top of all of the mills that are already here in Northwest Indiana, the harbor. It's really something. So the Great Lakes and all of the resources, and again, Indiana is full of resources, and it's a midget compared to the resources in all of the surrounding states. Okay. An aspect. The aspect of iron and shipping, the Great Lakes, period, the amount of fresh water represented in the Great Lakes, and how it has to be all absolutely pure, beautiful spring water from the ground. Coming up, and I would imagine coming from either thousands of or just many enormous springs below Superior. Because, for one thing, Superior is so damn deep. And they say there's a lot of places that are just too dangerous. They're so deep in Superior and so on and so forth. All this fresh water from Superior collecting in this gigantic body of water of Superior that actually just flows down and into these other Great Lakes and all the way out to the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Northern Atlantic Ocean area. All coming from this one body of water feeding 4 heads, 4 chiefs, 4 other lakes. 20% of the world's fresh water right here, folks. Just right here. And that doesn't count all of the rest of the fresh water represented by the massive, enormous major rivers that there are east of the Mississippi. It is such a monster of a freshwater system. Just a monster. Everything around these lakes grows like you would not believe it. You get up to these northern latitudes around Superior and you think, oh, geez, so cold. It is so lush. It's so utterly, absolutely, unbelievably lush around here. You just wouldn't believe it. Like Superior waters the whole area all around it. Yeah. Such a beautiful place. So the one little aspect of all this, and by the way, here's something that should be a red flag. They say that Hollywood, and when I say Hollywood, it's the whole movie industry, movie, television, media industry that's supposedly existing to entertain and make bucks by entertaining, which is bullshit. The point of the whole industry actually is to push subliminal messages to get us to kind of locked and programmed in our minds certain things that they want us to believe are absolute truths. Those are the sub-narratives. And then what they do is they write a compelling drama over all of those things. That's the whole point to it. It is high science propaganda. If it truly existed to make movies out of stories that were compelling, there would be countless movies made about, for instance, all of the harrowing and compelling shipwrecks that are said to have occurred on the Great Lakes. The number of shipwrecks are so mind-boggling. They say that the earliest ship hauling commercial cargo on the lakes, ship, not birch bark canoes that they say were hauling pelts for big money. They try to convince us that that was the big money maker that caused so much development around the Great Lakes were pelts. Were like beaver pelts. Pelts. One more time, pelts. We're not talking about birch bark canoes hauling paltry sums of pelts. We're talking about ship, commercial ship. The earliest being in about the 1670s. 1670s. Okay, so from the 1670s to the 1970s, do you realize the last authentic, genuine shipwreck was the Fitz, the Edmund Fitzgerald, in the mid-1970s, 1975. That's the last one. And then somehow we're to believe that since 1975, the shipping industry in every way, shape, and form on the Great Lakes got so kick-ass overnight that we haven't had a shipwreck like all of these since 1975. 45 years. Nothing. 45 years, nothing. And contrast that to this. They estimate from about the 1670s to 1970s, 300 years. That's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 6,000 shipwrecks have occurred on the Great Lakes. 6,000. 6,000. So what that does over 300 years, that averages 10 shipwrecks a year. 10 shipwrecks a year. And my dumbass just had to pause and get my calculator out, and I'm glad I did. That's 20 shipwrecks a year. You know, I do use things to make sure that I'm not doing something wrong, like bad math. The reason I said 10 is because, so there's like with any other historical BS that they want to sell us, there's never any agreement between the so-called experts. So some actually will put it as low as 3,000. Some will put it as high as 10,000. So average, low end average, 10 per year for 300 years, then nothing for 45. That's low end. Okay, so-called experts like this guy who's really making the rounds these days, Rick Mixter. Rick Mixter. I mean, he'll say 6, if not more. Average of 20 shipwrecks per year from the 1670s to the 1970s. Average 20 shipwrecks per year. Then nothing for 45 years. Wow. Super wow. There's all kinds of drama if that's what Hollywood was doing. But they don't want people's conscious minds to be aware of the great importance and the massive, massive, massive wealth that comes from around the Great Lakes region. Massive wealth. And how so much of it has been destroyed, and for what reason? They don't want people looking hard into all of the copper mines of the Keweenaw and why they were shut down. Almost inexplicably in the 60s and 70s. All of the iron mines of the Upper Peninsula and northern Wisconsin, and the zinc mines, amongst other vital industrial metals, and their shutdowns, their downsizing. Why so many people in an area so rich as, for instance, the UP, are oftentimes so poor. They're so poor. You visit the UP, it is so poor. You wouldn't believe when you drive through the roads and the towns and stuff how meager and poor the people are, and the stories for like why major mines were shut down. They just don't add up. Well, all of the sudden, after World War II, the price of iron ore dropped so significantly that they couldn't justify the continuation of so many mines that are dotted everywhere around here, they'll tell you. Because they just didn't have a high enough ore content in the rock or whatever. But you travel around the UP and everything is red. Everything is red. The soil's red. It's so red. So much. There's so much iron in everything. All around Lake Superior. It's amazing. So, they don't want people to really understand how resource-rich the place is. With lumber, with iron, with copper, with zinc. I'm forgetting things. There's so much. Grain. Ah, the grain that comes out of Duluth. The grain that comes out of Duluth. Shipped out of Duluth. Abroad, by the way. Especially abroad to other nations. To support the inorganic, ungrassroots growth of populations of nations like specifically India and China. African nations. Yeah, buddy. It is all a very complex plan and system of the people who are secretly running all of these things to keep specifically the people who live, especially east of the Mississippi and around the Great Lakes and in all other areas that are so rich. It's not just the lakes. It's just the lakes are such a concentration of these things. To keep them always, for one thing, in a certain economic class, low economic class, by limiting how much production is done regarding all of these resources, for one thing. And they use a lot of other methods, too, that are even more dirty and degenerate methods. We could go into things like inoculations at birth. We could go into things like pitting races against one another in close proximities, especially in a number of areas where one people could find themselves growing in influence and power if they weren't in constant cultural odds with other peoples that they have deliberately injected into these places. You know, they do it and have done it in the early part of the 20th century in around Chicago and Northwest Indiana, in and around Detroit. Look at what major areas these are. Saginaw, Traverse City, along the eastern coast of Lake Michigan, Milwaukee, areas of Minnesota, Wisconsin. Places where a lot of these people that they're bringing, because of their physiology, don't fare as well. They don't give a shit about those people. Those same people who they will cancel us for simply stating certain things about factors, you know, not in malicious ways whatsoever. But if we're just trying to state factors, real problems, you know, that exist, not necessarily, we don't have to draw conclusions that are based on dislike or anger or anything of the sort. But if we just want to point at phenomenon, numbers, and things like that, something that you call scientific, you're going to get canceled over that. Because they don't want people educated enough, for one thing, on both sides. They don't want these various peoples that they're pitting against one another in close proximity to be educated enough to understand that they're being used. They're being used. And neither group is winning out. Neither group. They're both getting screwed. So, pretty interesting little thing here. This relates to a little trip I took a while back. We went up and stayed right near Gladstone, which is sort of upper Green Bay, Gladstone and Escanaba. We spent a lot of time in Escanaba. Beautiful place. I liked Escanaba very much. Escanaba used to have a number of ore docks. And ore docks are serious business, buddy. As far as from an engineering standpoint, they are serious business. So we took a little trip. It doesn't take that long from Escanaba to get up here to Marquette. So it's pretty fast, honestly. The roads are relatively clear. Just beautiful drives through the Upper Peninsula. So we spent a day up around Marquette. What a beautiful place Marquette is. And Marquette actually has 2 ore docks still standing. Both of them are concrete docks. I don't know of any of these lumber ore docks, what they say entirely framed from lumber, that are still standing. I personally, just from an engineering standpoint, I don't see the point and purpose of even constructing an ore dock out of beams of lumber. They have to hold, for one thing, they have to hold so much weight. If you figure an ore dock that even, let's say it had enough pockets to accommodate, you know, any, we'll just say the 600-foot class, which was the common class until the invisible rulers started bringing in the salties. And that's a story in and of itself. These ships, these 1,000-footers that are created in these salt docks, and then they're bringing in components, essentially up through the locks and channels and all of that stuff, and now they're being operated on the lake. So the 600-foot class, 60 foot wide, 600 foot long. The Fitz was a bit bigger than that, of course, because they say some of these were actually lengthened, like the Arthur Anderson was lengthened, and it was a little bit bigger, 700 something feet by about 75. That's the 1-in-10 ratio, but your 600-footer was the common class. So let's say what we've got on something like that, we would have, and of course the hatches and the number of hatches can vary. Let's say we're looking at somewhere around 12 to 20 hatches, whatever. I'm sorry to be that flippant about it, just that's not the main point of this. You would need an ore dock that had, because you're going to have to rotate what pockets that you have full for ships coming in. You can't just fill up one row of pockets, have a ship come in, empty it. Now you've got to fill that back up before any other ship can come and get more ore. You see, so there would have to be enough for 2 of the 600-foot class to go, back to back. You'd have to have at least 50 pockets on each side of an ore dock, carrying these huge, huge, huge amounts of weight. Huge amounts of weight, including the weight of the trains and the fully loaded train cars that would have to go over the fully loaded pockets to load other pockets. I'm just not seeing the practicality of these ones that they say were built on lumber. But they've got pictures. Because yes, they could never manipulate those pictures. Never. You know that. They can never, ever, ever manipulate the pictures. Duh. Anyways, I visited both ore docks when I was in Marquette. And this one here at Presqu'île, this is the one that's just so impressive. This break wall here is somewhere in about almost a half-mile breakwater up here to the north. The Presqu'île dock is at a location that is just so perfect to keep the ships and all of the industry out of the severe Lake Superior storms. And Lake Superior storms are severe. Just like Lake Michigan storms. Lake Michigan storms are really severe. Huron, all of the Great Lakes, they have storms that are something else, man. But Superior, what makes Superior worse in some ways is, first off, the coldness of the water. And, these boats will be iced up. Everything's so cold. There's no salt in the water to counteract that in any way, shape, or form. This is all fresh water, and things will get iced so bad. This ore dock is one of the few standing in the UP. Is so sad. There used to be ore docks in so many places in the UP. I visited it. It's nearly a quarter-mile long out onto the water. When you think about the logistics to build such a thing, and you have to. You can look these things up and good luck to you getting information on these ore docks, especially this one. It's really hard to find. When you try to find, I want to find some details on the building of the modern dock. This particular dock in Presqu'île. Good luck. Some will say, well, it was built in 1911. Some will say it was built in 1912. They'll typically say it was built to replace an existing lumber frame dock that was there. And I'm still not sure how that works. And here's why. Because for one thing, they said that when this was built in 1911, 1912, that the guy who owned the company hired some brilliant guy. No, actually, they said the owner of the company was some kind of visionary, and he designed the 1 mile grade that goes up to this. I'm going to pull this out a little bit. So you figure where it's sitting because of the shape of the presqu'île. And presqu'île essentially means almost an island. That's why you'll have presqu'îles all over the place in the Great Lakes. Tons of places named presqu'île. Almost an island or a peninsula. That's a presqu'île. From this turn, where the cursor mouse is, it's a 1 mile grade to get the train without using too much energy. Because every foot that you go vertically over 100 feet on railroad tracks, you are exponentially increasing the amount of energy it takes to push all of that weight, like per ton they rate it at, up to get it out here. And then to bring it back down on too steep of grade, and to slow the roll of that whole thing takes an immense amount of energy and wear and tear on the entire train. So it's very important that you don't exceed, if you can help it, 1 foot rise in every 100 feet. That's a 1%. And in general, they would like to avoid going past that. The steepest grade I know of in North America is at like a 5-point-something% grade. Really steep. The other thing they try to avoid is curves, and as we can see, we got 2 curves here. So they had to work with 2 curves, and achieving this grade, which, let's see, this dock, I think I have the info on how tall it is. Okay, right here, I have a PDF. This is a PDF of the sign they have. This is pictures I took on my vacation, which, by the way, I was stopped by security taking pictures. I was on public land when I was taking a lot of these pictures, by the way. Still got stopped by security. Got my ID and everything on public fucking land. They allow you to do that. Why? Because I could be a terrorist. A terrorist. That's basically their blanket term for doing whatever they want to whoever they want under the pretext of security. Because somebody might want to destroy this infrastructure for what reason, we have no idea. We're just going to make up because they're part of a group called Chaos, and that's what they want. Like from Get Smart. That's what Chaos wanted. They just want chaos. No rhyme or reason. They want chaos, so we have to stop them. I got stopped by security, just taking pictures. They were close-up pictures, but I was on public property when I was taking them. Now, this sign wasn't on public property, but their private properties, you're allowed to go on certain parts of their private property, like fish and all that stuff. This wasn't when I was stopped. It was when I was taking pictures of the footers of the bridge. And that bridge goes right over a public road and public sidewalks. So, yeah, this is one of the pictures I took, but I was able to get a PDF of it. And it says right here in this graphic at the lower, that's 75 feet, the whole ore dock here. As you can see here, this is one of the Lakers. This is one of the old school, kick-ass, basically 60-something by 600-something foot Lakers with the pilot's house in the front. Pulled up to essentially the west side of the ore dock. You have to stand near this ore dock to get a sense of what an amazing titan these things are. They're so impressive. They're so impressive. So, the top of it, 75 foot above the water. So 75 feet above sea level, talking about grade. Now, yes, I don't know exactly how many feet above water level it is back here. But you just figure this whole area, so where the ramp or the grade starts, it's all pretty low because it's all pretty relatively swampy and the river is kind of all over the place here and whatnot. It's not high. So if they didn't want to use up too much energy at getting these very, very, very weighty lines of train cars up onto the dock, if they wanted to go at a 1% grade, it would have to be over a mile of grading. And this is very accurate work to grade this out. And they had to turn it twice. They had to turn this whole thing twice. You got one turn at the start here, and you've got one turn towards the end. That uses energy too, the turns. I have heard stories that claim that they had this whole thing up, this nearly quarter-mile long ore dock, which is said to have, see, it says the 1912 dock. That's what they just tend to call it. It's built in 1912 or 1911, 1912. But the details are much, much harder to find and get them pinned down on. So this consists of, let's see. So real quick, this lower picture right here. The ore dock is 1,250 feet long, so about a quarter mile. 60 feet wide, 75 feet above the water. The 200 pockets have a total storage capacity of 50,000 tons. 50,000 tons. That's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah. They're big. Super, super big. So it's about 100 pockets per side. Got to get the train up 75 feet in the air by the time you get here. So what they don't go into is the logistics of if there was a wood dock, what height it sat at, how in 1911, 1912 they were actually loading these old boats. You get a lot of different stories about how the older boats were loaded, because here's the thing. If you look at one of these Lakers pulled up and docked here at the ore dock, and you see the way that the chutes fall into the hatches, it's perfect. It's just beautiful the way they're designed in conjunction with one another. And they say within a couple of years, maybe, that not only did they make this over mile long grade with 2 turns to get us up high enough at 75 feet above water level, build a very long bridge across the land here out to the ore dock. And you have to have channels here that are going to be, you don't want them 60, you want them much more than 60 feet wide so that the boats aren't bottoming out. You know, they pull the 1,000-footers up into here now, which are 100 feet wide. And even the locks have to be about 110 to 120, and they're just barely easing into them. Okay? You have to have not only the, you would have to have for the Lakers at least 70 feet. To clear. At least, let's say 80 each side, all the way up to the nearest pockets, where they could pull up to. But also, so that they can make their turns and their approaches, you'd have to make sure that all of this whole area was dredged deep enough for those approaches. Because all it takes is one ship that would bottom out, get stuck in here, to halt shipping and cost the poor shipping owners a lot of money. A lot of time and a lot of effort, and just the amount of concrete in this quarter-mile long dock, which we can see more pictures of it here. The amount of concrete, staggering. You see that down there, and maybe I can get, I don't know if I can get, if I have better up-close pictures. I do that I took myself. Let me see if I can go through some of these. Up-close photo. Now, this is a photo I took myself. So what you're seeing in there, and if you understand that here, they show it's almost like a gable roof house. The frame of the steel for the top here, all the pockets and the deck, that it's at least 2 different railroad tracks, one on each side, so that these cars can come up and dump their load right in the pockets. This whole big frame, it's like a gable roof frame here. Okay, so that's going up 40, 50 feet at least before you start getting into steel construction on top of all the concrete. Go back to that. You can see the amount of concrete is staggering in just this ore dock. And if they're claiming to have built it in a couple of years, one thing you have to remember, outside of building forms, and these are massive, massive forms they had to build, especially up in the UP, you have a relatively brief season in which you can pour concrete for it to cure completely. And you're not pouring all this concrete all that fast. It's limited by how you can get to these areas because it's out on the water. Getting the concrete to it, even if you have a mixing plant right there, getting the concrete to, say, the quarter mile out, the end of the dock, or at the beginning of the dock, either which way, you'd have to fully pour these areas to maybe build something temporary that allows you to get to further and further areas where you're pouring this concrete at. It's a serious operation. They say that they did in a couple of years. All the steel components for the pocket system up above, and these chutes they're so cool. The way that these chutes are even just designed to minimize the amount of dust and taconite pellets lost and everything, which they say the whole aspect of the industry of making the taconite pellets at the mines is a newer thing that I don't believe either, because forming the iron into a taconite pellet is just one of the smartest ways of processing the iron for shipment. Period. It's a modern marvel. I mean, I don't remember seeing these ore docks on modern marbles. And the funny thing is, when I went looking for the ore dock at Presqu'île, I couldn't find the ore dock at Presqu'île, the ore dock at Marquette, the ore docks at Superior Duluth pages with all kinds of detailed stuff on these marvels. These ore docks are marvels. I found one Wikipedia page just entitled ore dock. And it literally is proposing to cover the entirety of ore docks in general. It doesn't begin to. So this is one of the steel frames built. And actually, I was where was I stopped at? Right in here. So I was taking pictures of the rock. So it's like rock all in back in here. So this is one of the things, this big frame that they built for this plate covered iron bridge we've got here, steel bridge. You see a couple of these supports spanning from the buildup, that whole grade having to be built little by little, engineering it so precise, and then laying the tracks down over it to get to this bridge, which takes us over to the mind-numbingly brilliant, huge ore dock. Here's some more images of it. The supports for the plate bridge onto the ore dock, and here's where we've got these sections here of supports going into the ground. What I was interested in is it looked like so much of this was rock. And there's so much rock out here at Presqu'île because the story is that all of this was just built up and graded, and all of this looked so much like rock. That's why I was taking these close-up pictures from outside the fence on public ground. Here's some of them. So I was trying to get, these are under Pictures of the underside of the bridge. Here's pictures of the footers. I was taking close-up pictures of the footers. Because, of course, it's impossible to get the date of concrete. Now, this is a really, really neat little structure right here. It is the coal intake for the power plant that's back there. And I think the guard who stopped me, which he was a nice guy. He's a cool guy. He's doing his job. Just stopped me, got my ID, and we had like a 15, 20-minute conversation. Very cool guy. And he told me a lot about everything that was all around there. He told me that the power plant, this huge coal-fired power plant, was being shut down. I think he said it was going to be turned into an aggregates company shipping out. This right here is essentially self-unloading ships would have to pull up and put their conveyor like right up into this chute and unload their coal into this chute. And then it would be conveyed. This is all a conveyor belt, this whole bridge here. Conveyor belt up to the main plant. And so I thought, well, I need to get, because they're going to have a story on this guy right here. Because the only way that you could unload into here is self-unloaders, which are supposed to be very recent. You understand. So building this whole thing just for a pretty limited run of use is interesting. Yeah, there's a lighthouse out there. See that out there past the... Yeah, that's on the end of the breakwater or break wall. That's like a half-mile long. Some of these were slightly blurry because I was trying to really get... Because a lot of this is private property. I couldn't just go right up to the shore wherever I wanted to without being on their property. And if you think security is bad at these ore docks, security is super, super bad at power plants. Because, of course, chaos might try to do something horrible just for the sake of chaos, of course. Some more shots of it. Like, so you see this? So you see how the iron frame appears to be embedded into solid rock. It doesn't look like this was built up. It looks like this was all rock that either existed here and they built right into it, or some of it had to be blasted out for whatever the usage of the land was below this. You know, but the story just didn't seem like it washed. These are the footers, which it kind of makes you wonder why they weren't taking far better care of these footers of this bridge that by the time I got to it was only 110-something years old, so they say. Why more money wasn't put into the care of these footers for this bridge. And the bridge itself. I mean, it just looked like it had gotten so much wear and tear for something that was only about 100 years old. Which is really funny that it's only supposed to be 100 years old, because in a documentary that was made about one of Ford's ore ships, because Ford's Rouge plant over on, oh, come on, what island is it off the Detroit River? Somebody out there would know. Their Rouge plant had their own fleet of ore ships. There was a documentary made on that where they're pulling up to this dock. And they say that the ore carriers, it's pulling up to the ancient ore dock in Marquette. And I thought to myself, when is a century or so old made something ancient? It's weird. It's just, it surprised me at how old these piers or footers looked and why they weren't actually being kept up better with how much money these places take in. So you could read the whole Wikipedia on ore docks and you're going to get very, very little information. Now, if you search long and hard, really, really long and hard, and probably go to various local libraries and historical societies, you might find a story that says that this ore dock was built somewhere between about 1911 and 1912 or 13. Of course, that doesn't allow anywhere near the kind of time that you would need to pour and allow to cure all of the concrete that is in this thing. It's not just above water, you understand. Because they have to dig down so that there's a draft of at least... they would need at least like 20 to be safe, 28 feet. Probably if you want to be really safe, 30 feet for the draft down below. So you'd have to have a sheer wall that all this was sitting on going down that far, going down to bedrock. And I'll tell you, when I was standing there, and if I flip back through this, when I was standing there right near the ore dock, because there is a marina, so you can move all about between the marina and the ore dock, and you're not on private land, you're not on the ore docks private land, this area right here. So when I was standing out there and I was looking straight down into the water, to me, it looked like it was bedrock. So think about, first off, cutting sheer walls straight down into the rock, because Lake Superior is so rocky. Oh my God, it's so rocky. The amount of time to cut that quarter mile for a 25 to 30 foot draft straight down from the base of this ore dock, and then to make sure it was at least a good 70, 80 feet wide. That kind of time. I'm sorry, and it's in the UP. So getting people up there, I mean, even the population of the UP in the early 1900s, very, very, very low. And getting people up there to do these projects, and this isn't the only thing going on or said to be going on in the early 1900s in the UP. There are locks supposedly being built in the Sioux, which are beyond impressive, these locks. All of this industry that exists around Superior and around the Great Lakes in general, it's not in the public consciousness how immensely impressive it all is, how monstrous it all is, and especially how lucrative it all is for some. For some. Not for that guard who stopped me, that security guard who stopped me. He said security guards started there at about $15 an hour. Yep. In general, the average wage that you would make up there is quite low. The standard of living up there is quite low, but it's just so nice. It's just so nice. I'd take the hit. I mean, that's me. And that's me, and that's not during fly season. And of course, the winters are hard too, but I'm not going to sit here and wax rhapsodic about the place. It's just, I love it there. But the idea is taking a couple of years for this whole structure. It's not just the dock. And all the components of the dock, you have 100 chutes on each side. They all have to be manufactured to very precise specifications. The whole chute, it's a very complex system that you're dealing with, and a lot of it's so brilliantly manual in some ways, but it also needs electricity. Isn't that interesting? You got the power plant right near there. That's convenient. If you want this to flow smoothly, you would certainly want power running those chutes. The chutes are enormous. And it's hard to tell from here, but I mean, this is a standard size train car up here on top. I got lucky enough to visit it when we had a train up top here. So look at the size of the chutes. Look at these train cars. 200 of them manufactured. 100 pockets on each side of this thing. All steel. Put on top of all this concrete. With at least 25 to 30 foot shear cut into the rock, or something built into the bedrock. Essentially, you need walls, you need sheer walls, so that these boats can pull up without bottoming out, cutting out their hulls on jagged rocks, below the water level. That all has to be engineered. The approach has to be engineered. A half mile of breakwater has to be engineered and built to make this a safe harbor. And you have this huge concrete dock over here as well. And this huge coal conveyor on this side as well. So you need even more dugout for the draft to get up near here. Excuse me. Yep. A lot of work. Whole lot of work. And almost nobody is aware. It's not in the popular consciousness of the infrastructure that skirts the Great Lakes and how important they are to anyone who wants to be in power. And when I say in power, I mean in power over the world. In power over the world. Because if you want to control the world, and the people controlling the world want to control the world, and they want to stay controlling the world. If you want to control the world, you have to control the Great Lakes. If you want to control the Great Lakes, it doesn't hurt to control everything east of the Mississippi River. This isn't being done by random cowboys, every man in it for himself. This has to be done by an effort of a number of peoples who are willing to work in conjunction with one another, whether they like each other very much or not. They would have to be in agreement that they want to control the world. If you want to control the world, you have to control this place. And if this place is one of, if not the key resource to the control of the world, you might not, and if you want to do it all in secret, you might not want the world to be all that conscious of how important this place is. This place very much, and this place east of the Mississippi very much as well. You might want to keep that on the down low. Very important place, with a lot of amazingly important aspects to it and stories about it that are rarely seeing the light of day as far as publishing. And in the conscious mind, it's mind-blowing how few know the history, at least even the popular history, let's say, of this whole area and region. It's really something. I would say if you want to have your eyes opened, just look more into how resource rich and how much industry and therefore how much money surrounds the Great Lakes alone. And I'm at an hour 25. Almost didn't realize that. So I'll wrap this briefs up. And if you haven't yet, please check out the Aubrey Hours episode 14, the Vertical Flip. Episode 2 of the Vertical Flip, so the Aubrey Hour episode 15, will be out very soon. Where if I don't conclude it, I'll certainly get pretty far down the road on all of those very, very interesting looks into the text, where that word in that word study comes alive in the text, and we really start to be able to judge it based on the context. So please visit my store, the Teespring store. Pick something up. If you see a product that you like, but my logo's not on it, let me know. I'll throw my logo on there. I'll probably take a little bit more time than just throwing it on there so that you can purchase that thing, which helps me. I get anywhere from 20 to 40% at suggested retail price off of those things. If you want to be on an Aubrey Project mailing list, send me an email and just put it in the subject. Add me to mailing list to aubreyproject.info, John at aubreyproject.info. The link's in the description. And everything else and all that. And thank you again to all my supporters who have helped me so much and still do to this day to do what I do. I really appreciate that more than I can really express. So I'll see you next time.